She parked her shiny new Bentley right in front of my barn door like she owned the place. I stood there for a moment, holding a bag of feed, staring at the car that completely blocked the entrance. My horses were kicking inside, waiting to be let out, but Karen leaned on her car with sunglasses on, smirking. "You can't use this barn anymore. HOA rules," she said, tapping her nails on the hood like she was proud of herself. I tried to stay calm, reminding her this was my land, my barn, and there had never been any HOA here. But she waved a piece of paper in my face, some fake notice stamped with a logo she must have printed off the internet. "I'm in charge here now. You'll have to move." My jaw clenched, but I didn't argue. Instead, I quietly walked over to my old green tractor, turned the key, and let the engine roar. Karen's smirk faded when I steered straight toward her Bentley. She screamed, "You wouldn't dare." But the sound of metal crunching under heavy tires was louder than her voice. Dust flew, her car alarm blared, and she froze in shock. I leaned out, calm as ever, and said, "This is my barn. You don't block my doors." Karen's scream echoed across the property as she dropped the fake notice and ran toward the wrecked Bentley, her hands shaking.
"You're finished."
"I'm calling the cops," she shouted, fumbling for her phone. I stayed seated on the tractor, dust settling around me, and said, "Go ahead, but make sure you tell them you trespassed on my land." Her eyes widened like I'd just flipped the script on her, but she dialed anyway, pacing in circles. Within minutes, a black SUV rolled up. 2 men in uniforms jumped out, flashing badges. Karen pointed at me like a director in a movie. "That's him. Arrest him for destruction of property." The taller man walked over, glaring at me, and ordered, "Step off the tractor. You're under arrest." But something didn't sit right. Their uniforms looked off, badges dull, patches stitched poorly. They didn't look like real cops. I kept my hands on the wheel and asked, "What department are you from?" The shorter one barked, "Don't question us. We're taking you in." Karen grinned from ear to ear, clutching her bag like she'd already won. What she didn't know was that the moment she called them, my motion cameras on the barn wall had started recording everything. Her threats, the fake notice, and now these so-called officers. I finally stood, stepped down from the tractor and looked them in the eye, calm, steady, and I said one line that made Karen's smile crack. "You boys better hope those badges are real, because I used to train the sheriff's department on how to spot fakes." The fake cops stiffened at my words, exchanging a quick glance that gave them away. Karen didn't notice. She was too busy laughing like she'd already won. "Finally, someone is putting this hillbilly in his place," she sneered, crossing her arms. The taller fake officer stepped closer, hand on his belt like he was armed. "We don't need to prove anything to you. You're coming with us," he said, but his voice cracked just enough for me to catch it. I stayed calm, pulling my phone from my pocket without rushing. "Funny thing about small towns," I said slowly. "The sheriff's on speed dial." I pressed one button, and before they could react, the loudspeaker from my barn camera blasted Karen's own voice, like, "You're finished." "I'm calling the cops," followed by the fake officer's shaky demand to arrest me. The look on her face shifted from cocky to pale in seconds. The shorter fake tried to grab my arm, but I stepped back, raising my voice toward the camera. "Sheriff, if you're watching this live feed, you might want to get down here." Silence fell. Karen frowned, confused, until the sound of real sirens cut through the air, growing louder by the second. She turned around slowly, her mouth falling open as 2 marked sheriff's cruisers pulled up behind her Bentley's crushed remains. Karen stammered, No, they're the real officers." "Not him!" But the deputies who stepped out weren't even looking at me. They had their eyes locked on the 2 imposters, hands drifting to their holsters. One of the real deputies said firmly, "You two, drop whatever you're carrying and step away now." Karen's confidence shattered. She whispered, "Wait, what's happening?" But she didn't get an answer. The sheriff himself stepped out of the second cruiser, his boots crunching on the gravel. He didn't even look at me at first. He walked straight up to the fake cops, eyes hard, voice booming. "I told you clowns to stay out of my county. Impersonating officers? That's a federal charge." The 2 men froze, panic spreading across their faces. Karen's jaw dropped as she spun toward me. "What do you mean?" "They're real police. They came when I called." That's when the sheriff finally turned his head, giving me the smallest grin. "You handled this well, deputy. I'll take it from here." Karen blinked, her eyes darting between us. "A deputy?" She choked. I stepped forward, my voice calm but sharp. I never told you who I was, Karen. I just told you this was my land. You assumed I was powerless. That was your mistake. The real deputies cuffed the imposters while Karen's face twisted red with rage. No, this isn't fair. He destroyed my car. He threatened me, she shrieked, pointing at the crushed Bentley like it was a murder scene. The sheriff raised a hand to silence her. Ma'am, your car was parked trespassing on private property, blocking a barn door. And we've got your fake eviction notice recorded on security footage. I'd advise you to stop talking before you add obstruction to the list. Karen staggered back, eyes wild. Her perfect image slipping away as neighbors started gathering near the fence line. Phones out, recording every second. She hissed at me under her breath. You think you've won? You don't know who I am. I leaned closer just enough for her to hear. Neither do you. Karen's eyes darted to the crowd of neighbors filming, and suddenly her panic twisted into fake confidence. She raised her voice so everyone could hear, pointing at me like a villain in a courtroom drama. This man is dangerous. He used his tractor like a weapon. He could have killed me. Gasps rippled through the crowd, and for a split second she almost had them believing her. I didn't flinch. I simply tapped my phone screen, and the footage from my barn cameras played loud and clear on the mounted speaker. Karen's voice echoed across the property. You're finished. I'm calling the cops. Finally, someone is putting this hillbilly in his place, followed by the imposters trying to arrest me. The crowd's murmurs turned into laughs, then disgusted whispers directed at her. One neighbor shouted, "She brought fake cops?" Another added, "Did she really block his barn with her car?" Phone stayed raised, recording every second of her unraveling. Karen's face flushed crimson as she spun in circles, yelling, "No, that's edited. He's lying. He set me up." But the harder she tried, the more pathetic she looked. The sheriff stepped closer, voice low but sharp enough for all to hear. Ma'am, everything you just said is on 3 different cameras, and now it's on half the neighborhood's phones. You might want to stop before you bury yourself completely. Karen's breath came out ragged, her hands trembling as she tried to fix her hair, her dress, her broken image. But the crowd wasn't buying it. Someone laughed. Bentley or not, she just got crushed worse than her car. I turned back toward my barn, calm as ever, and muttered the line that sealed it. Funny thing about the truth. It doesn't need a Bentley to shine. Karen's voice cracked as she pushed through the crowd, desperate to salvage whatever was left of her pride. Sheriff, wait, this is all a misunderstanding, she pleaded, her hands flying dramatically. I can make a donation to the department. A very generous one. We don't have to go through all this paperwork. The neighbors gasped, some even laughing out loud. She had just tried to bribe the sheriff in front of half the town, and her Bentley was still sitting there like a crushed tin can. The sheriff crossed his arms, his face hardening. Karen, this isn't your first time, is it? Her head snapped up. What? What are you talking about? The sheriff pulled a small folder from his cruiser and flipped it open. 2 months ago, over in Pine County, you tried to evict a family with another fake HOA. Same stunt. Same fake letters, and those charges are still open. He tilted the folder so the neighbors could see the official seal. Looks like you've been running scams from county to county, hoping no one would connect the dots. Karen staggered back, shaking her head furiously. No, those people lied. They were squatters. But her voice was drowned out by the sound of neighbors booing, their phones capturing every word. She spun on me, her mask finally gone, eyes burning with hatred. You think you're clever because you have cameras and tractors? You think this is over? I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only she and the sheriff could hear. It's not over. Until the cuffs click. The sheriff didn't hesitate. He pulled out a pair of steel handcuffs, the sound of metal snapping shut echoing through the barnyard. Karen screamed, thrashing like a child throwing a tantrum as the crowd erupted in cheers. Karen kicked and screamed as the deputies dragged her toward the cruiser, her designer heels sinking in the dirt. You can't do this to me. I have rights. I own this neighborhood, she shrieked, twisting against the cuffs. The crowd only got louder, some filming, some outright laughing at the sight of the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA being hauled off like a criminal. One neighbor yelled, "Hey Karen, guess the HOA doesn't cover jail parking." Laughter rippled through the group, phones raised higher. Another shouted, "How's that Bentley holding up?" pointing at the mangled heap beside the barn. The humiliation burned across her face, and still she tried to spit venom. "You'll regret this. Every single one of you." The sheriff paused at the cruiser door and glanced back at me. "You want the honors?" he asked, holding the handle. I shook my head, keeping my voice calm. Justice doesn't need me to push it. She dug her own hole. That line made the crowd cheer again, louder this time. Karen's final attempt at dignity came as the deputies shoved her inside. She pressed her face against the window, hair a tangled mess, eyes wild. "This isn't over!" she screamed, her voice muffled through the glass. But the moment the door slammed shut, the crowd erupted into applause like the end of a show. The sheriff leaned against his cruiser, watching the cheers roll through the neighbors. "Funny thing about people like her," he said quietly. "Just for me. They think power's in money and noise, but the real power's in proof, and patience." I nodded, looking at the wrecked Bentley still half buried in tractor tracks. "And sometimes," I replied, "a little horsepower." The cruisers pulled away, sirens fading into the distance, and the crowd slowly began to scatter, still buzzing about what they'd just witnessed. I walked back to the barn, finally sliding the heavy door open. My horses poked their heads out, snorting, free at last. For a moment, the chaos felt far away. Just me, the land, and the quiet I had fought to protect. The sheriff lingered, tipping his hat. "You handled yourself well today. Most folks would have lost their temper." I looked at the ground for a second, then back at him. I didn't fight for this country overseas just to come home and be told I can't use my own barn. This land, it's all I've got left of my father. Nobody's going to take it from me with fake rules and shiny cars. The sheriff gave me a firm nod. The kind men give when words aren't enough. "Your dad would be proud." Then he climbed into his cruiser and rolled off, leaving dust and silence behind. I stood there, watching the sun dip low, golden light falling over the crushed Bentley like the perfect punctuation mark. My neighbors waved as they left, a few calling out, "Good job, deputy," or "That was justice." But all I did was raise a hand and smile faintly. As I latched the barn door for the night, I whispered to myself, "Freedom's not something you ask permission for. You stand your ground, and you protect it." And with that, I walked back toward my house, knowing one thing for sure: Karen might have thought she could block my barn, but she ended up proving a lesson she'll never forget. You don't mess with a man who knows the value of his land, his honor, and his freedom. Viral line for the ending. I didn't crush her car with my tractor. I crushed her whole scheme with the truth.